The text came in on December 17 at 2:14 p.m., right as I was reviewing the budget proposal for our new climate change exhibition. Derek was texting about New Year's Eve. Rebecca and I decided to keep it small this year, just her political circle. You understand? I set down my pen and read the message again. My brother Derek, 2 years younger than me, had never been known for subtlety, but this felt pointed even by his standards. Me? I thought you said it was going to be a big celebration. You got engaged 2 months ago, Derek. It is big. But Rebecca is a congresswoman now. Her colleagues will be there, other representatives, a senator, some major donors. She needs to make the right impression. You work at a museum gift shop or whatever. It's just not the same level. I leaned back in my chair and looked around my office on the 3rd floor of the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History. Through the window, the National Mall stretched toward the Capitol building, the same Capitol where Derek's fiancée, Congresswoman Rebecca Chin, now worked. Me? I see. Derek, don't be like that. We'll do dinner next month. Just us. Rebecca wants to get to know you better. But this party is important for her career. You get it, right? I didn't respond. In 20 minutes, I had a meeting with the Secretary of the Smithsonian to discuss our role in the upcoming International Museum Directors Summit. I still needed to finalize a keynote speech for the American Alliance of Museums conference in February. 17 curators were waiting on my approval for various exhibition proposals. I didn't have time to explain to my younger brother that I was the executive director of one of the most prestigious museums in the world, overseeing a staff of 1,200 people, managing a $180 million budget, and serving on 3 international boards dedicated to cultural preservation. He had never asked what I actually did. Museum work had been explanation enough for him ever since I took the position 4 years ago. My assistant, Jennifer, knocked and stepped inside. Dr. Mitchell, the secretary's office just called. They're ready for you. Thanks, Jen. I grabbed my tablet with the summit proposal and stood. Everything okay? She asked, noticing my expression. Family, I said shortly. She nodded with quiet understanding. Jennifer had worked with me for 3 years. She'd fielded enough calls from Derek to know the dynamic. The meeting with the secretary went well. The International Museum Directors Summit would bring 50 of the world's most influential museum leaders to Washington in January. As the host institution's director, I would be coordinating the entire event, a significant responsibility and a massive opportunity to showcase American cultural leadership. The State Department is very interested in this, the secretary said. Secretary Williams said this as he leaned back in his chair. They viewed the summit as a form of soft diplomacy. Directors would be coming from the Louvre, the British Museum, the Hermitage, and the National Palace Museum in Taiwan. He added that Congresswoman Chen's office had already reached out, asking to attend the opening reception. My head snapped up. Rebecca Chin. Yes, he confirmed. She chairs the House Subcommittee on Arts and Culture. She wants to meet the international delegates and discuss cultural exchange programs. He smiled slightly. I understand she's engaged to your brother. Small world. Very small, I replied carefully. I'll have my office coordinate with hers. The reception is January 14th, he continued. Mark your calendar. You'll be giving remarks and introducing the keynote speaker. I nodded, my mind already racing. January 14th, 3 weeks away. I didn't tell Derek about the summit. I didn't tell him that his fiancée would be touring the museum in an official capacity, or that she would be meeting with me directly. A small, petty part of me wanted to see how it would all unfold on its own. A larger part of me was simply tired of explaining myself, tired of being dismissed by my own family. Our parents had always favored Derek. He was the golden child, the charmer, the one who graduated from Georgetown Law and now worked at a prestigious firm in D.C. When I chose to pursue museum studies and cultural anthropology, my mother had sighed and said, well, at least you'll have a nice, quiet job. A nice, quiet job. As if running one of the world's great museums were the same as filing paperwork in a back office. Derek had proposed to Rebecca on election night in November. She'd won her congressional race by 18 points, flipping a traditionally red district. She was young, 36 and ambitious, razor-sharp, and already being mentioned as a rising star in the party. I had met her exactly once, at a family dinner Derek organized in October. She'd been friendly but distracted, already in full campaign mode. When Derek introduced me, he said, "This is my sister, Sarah. She works at the Natural History Museum." "Oh, how nice," Rebecca had replied, already turning away to take a call from her campaign manager. Museums are so important. That was the extent of our interaction. New Year's Eve came and went. I spent it at a small gathering hosted by the museum's chief curator, Dr. Patricia Okoye. Patricia's parties were legendary in the D.C. museum world, intimate, intellectual, filled with fascinating conversations among scholars, artists, and cultural leaders. I had far more engaging discussions there than I would have had at Derek's political networking event. On January 3rd, Jennifer stepped into my office with a strange look on her face. "Dr. Mitchell," she said, "I just got a call from Congresswoman Chin's office. They want to schedule a tour of the museum before the summit reception." "That's fine," I replied. "Coordinate with the protocol office." She hesitated. "They're requesting a private tour, with you personally leading it." I looked up. "Me specifically?" Jennifer nodded. Her chief of staff said the Congresswoman wants to understand the museum's operations at the highest level. She's very interested in museum leadership and cultural policy. She paused. "They've requested January 13th at 10 a.m., the day before the summit. Should I confirm it?" "Confirm it," I said. Jennifer hesitated. "Should I mention to her office that you're related to her fiancé?" "No," I replied. "If it's relevant, I'm sure it will come up." The next 10 days were swallowed by summit preparations. 50 museum directors meant 50 different egos, priorities, and expectations. The Louvre's director wanted additional security assurances. The British Museum's director requested a private meeting with the secretary. The director of the National Museum of China needed very specific dietary accommodations for her entire delegation. I coordinated it all with the support of my exceptional staff. This was what I did best, the complex logistics of cultural diplomacy, the delicate balance between honoring tradition and pushing innovation, the quiet politics of the international museum world. On January 10th, Derek called. "Hey, Sarah, listen, Rebecca mentioned she's doing some tour at your museum next week." "Yes," I said. "January 13th. "Right. So, the thing is, she doesn't really know you work there. I mean, she knows you work at a museum, but she thinks you're, like, a coordinator or something. Maybe in the gift shop." I said nothing. "Sarah. I just don't want it to be weird. Maybe you could just not mention that we're related. She's nervous about this summit, meeting all these international VIPs. I don't want her to feel awkward if she runs into you." "Runs into me," I repeated slowly. "You know what I mean. Just keep it professional. Don't make it about family stuff." "Derek," I asked, "do you actually know what I do at the museum?" "You work there." "Museum stuff?" "Look, I've gotta go. Just don't make things weird, okay?" He hung up. I sat there for a long moment, then opened the museum's website. My biography was prominently displayed on the leadership page. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Executive Director. Ph.D., Cultural Anthropology, Yale University. Former Deputy Director, Metropolitan Museum of Art. Board Member, International Council of Museums. Author of Cultural Preservation in the 21st Century. 2019 recipient of the National Medal of Arts. There was a professional photograph of me seated at my desk, the museum's soaring atrium visible through the window behind me. Contact information. A detailed CV. Derek had never looked, not once in 4 years. January 13th arrived cold and bright. I dressed with care that morning, a tailored charcoal suit, minimal jewelry, my hair pulled back into a neat, professional bun. I looked exactly like what I was, a senior executive at one of the most important cultural institutions in the world. At 9:45 a.m., Jennifer stepped into my office to brief me. Congresswoman Chin's motorcade just arrived, Jennifer said. Security is escorting her up, her chief of staff, 2 aides, and a press liaison. Press? I repeated. They'd like photos of her with the international flags in the main hall, Jennifer added. Good optics for her arts and culture subcommittee work. Of course it was. This visit was as much about her political profile as it was about any genuine interest in museums. At 9:58 a.m., my desk phone rang. Dr. Mitchell, security said, Congresswoman Chin's party is in the main lobby and ready for you. I'll be right down. I took the elevator to the ground floor. The museum wasn't open to the public yet, we had a full hour before the doors opened. The vast main hall lay quiet and echoing, occupied only by the security detail, Rebecca Chin, and her staff. Rebecca looked polished and composed in a navy dress and matching blazer. She was speaking with her press liaison, gesturing toward the soaring architecture, clearly mapping out photo angles. I approached without drawing attention. Her chief of staff, a sharp-eyed man in his 40s, noticed me first. Dr. Mitchell, he said, extending his hand. Tom Bradford, Congresswoman Chin's chief of staff. Thank you for accommodating this tour. Of course, I replied, shaking his hand. Then I turned to her. Congresswoman Chin, welcome to the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History. I'm Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the executive director. Rebecca turned toward me with a practiced political smile already in place. Dr. Mitchell, thank you so much for, she stopped mid-sentence. Her smile froze. Her eyes widened just slightly. Mitchell, she said slowly. Sarah Mitchell? Yes. As in Derek's sister. Sarah Mitchell? Yes. The silence that followed was heavy and unmistakable. Tom Bradford frowned, clearly confused. The aides exchanged quick glances. The press liaison hovered with her camera half-raised, unsure whether this was a moment to document. Rebecca's professional composure began to crack at the edges. Derek said you worked at a museum, she said carefully. He didn't mention that you run it. No, I said evenly. He wouldn't have mentioned that. He doesn't actually know what I do here. Her expression shifted through embarrassment, confusion, and finally realization. You're the executive director, she said. You're the executive director of the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History, one of the 19 Smithsonian museums. Yes, I replied. This is my primary responsibility. To his credit, Tom Bradford recovered quickly. Congresswoman, shall we begin the tour? Dr. Mitchell has generously set aside 2 hours for us. Yes, Rebecca said, though she was still looking at me. Yes, of course. I led them into the museum, beginning with the main exhibitions. I explained our mission, research, education, and the preservation of 145 million specimens and artifacts representing the natural and cultural history of our world. I guided them through our research facilities, where hundreds of scientists conducted groundbreaking work in biology, geology, anthropology, and paleontology. Rebecca asked thoughtful, incisive questions. She was clearly well briefed on cultural policy, and despite her obvious discomfort, she engaged with the material professionally. In the ocean hall, standing beneath the suspended model of the North Atlantic right whale, I explained our role in climate change research and public education. We're not just a museum, I said. We're a research institution. Our scientists publish more than 600 peer-reviewed papers every year. We advise Congress on environmental policy, cultural preservation, and scientific research funding. Congress? Rebecca repeated. You advise Congress? Yes. I've testified before the House Appropriations Committee 3 times in the past 2 years, most recently on the importance of funding cultural diplomacy programs. Tom Bradford made a quick note on his tablet. The Congresswoman chairs the subcommittee on arts and culture. I'm surprised your testimony didn't cross our desk. It may have, I replied evenly. I testified as Dr. Mitchell, executive director. Not as Derek's sister. Rebecca flinched. We moved on to the anthropology collections. I showed them artifacts from every continent, explained our repatriation programs for indigenous cultural objects, and discussed the ethical complexities of collections built during colonial eras. These are conversations museums around the world are grappling with, I said. Which is why the International Museum Directors Summit is so important. We need coordinated approaches to decolonization, climate change, digital access, and cultural preservation. The summit, Rebecca said slowly. That's tomorrow night. Yes. The opening reception is at the National Gallery, but we're hosting several working sessions here over the following 3 days. 50 directors from 32 countries, she said. And you're coordinating all of this? I'm the host director, I answered. I'll be giving the opening remarks and moderating 2 panel discussions. We walked through the Butterfly Pavilion, the Hall of Fossils, and the Human Origins exhibit. At each stop, I explained not only what visitors saw, but the research behind it, the educational programs, the community outreach, and the digital initiatives that brought our collections to millions of people around the world. By the time we reached my office suite on the 3rd floor, Rebecca looked stunned. Would you like to see where the administrative work happens? I asked. She nodded silently. My office overlooked the National Mall. The walls were lined with books, anthropology texts, museum studies journals, and cultural policy papers. On my desk sat neat stacks of reports, a framed photograph of me receiving the National Medal of Arts from the President, and a small fossil ammonite my mentor had given me when I completed my PhD. This is where you work, Rebecca said, more to herself than to me. Yes, I replied, though I spend just as much time in meetings, at donor events, testifying on the Hill, or visiting our research stations around the world. Tom Bradford was taking notes much faster now. Congresswoman, this represents an excellent partnership opportunity. Dr. Mitchell's work aligns perfectly with your subcommittee's priorities. Yes, Rebecca said faintly. I can see that. There was a knock, and Jennifer stepped inside. Dr. Mitchell, the secretary's office, called. They need your input on the French delegation's request. Tell them I'll call back in 20 minutes. And let them know the director of the Louvre would like to schedule a pre-summit call this afternoon, if possible. Jennifer nodded and left. Rebecca watched the exchange with growing distress. The director of the Louvre, she repeated. You're coordinating with the director of the Louvre? Among others, I said. The British Museum, the Hermitage, the Prado. It's part of the job. We stood in an awkward silence. Tom Bradford and the aides clearly sensed the personal undercurrent but continued to ignore it professionally. Congresswoman, Tom said carefully, we should probably discuss the reception tomorrow night, protocol, talking points, which delegates you'll want to prioritize meeting. Dr. Mitchell would be the person to advise on that. Yes, Rebecca said tightly, since she's organizing the entire event, testifies before Congress, runs a museum with 1,200 employees and a $180 million budget, advises on cultural policy, and receives medals from the president. Rebecca, I said quietly. She looked at me, and for the first time I saw genuine distress break through her polished exterior. Could we have a moment? She asked Tom. Alone. Tom and the aides excused themselves, closing the door behind them. Rebecca sank heavily into one of the chairs across from my desk. Derek told me you worked in a gift shop, she said. Derek doesn't know what I do, I replied. He's never asked. But you never corrected him. You never told him. He never gave me the opportunity. Every time we talk, it's about him, his cases at the firm, his career, his achievements. My work is just background noise. Museum stuff. Rebecca closed her eyes. He uninvited you from New Year's Eve because he said you weren't at the right level to meet my colleagues. I know. Oh my God. She opened her eyes, horrified. My colleagues, Sarah. Half the people at that party work on appropriations or cultural policy. They would have killed to meet you. Senator Williams was there. She's been trying to get a meeting with the Smithsonian about expanded funding. You could have connected her directly with the secretary. I had other plans, I said simply. I am so embarrassed, she whispered. I can't even, as she stood, paced to the window, and looked out over the National Mall. What must you think of me? I considered her for a moment. I think you're engaged to my brother, I said calmly, and you believed what he told you about me. That's reasonable, I said. No, it's not, Rebecca replied immediately. I should have looked you up. We're getting married, I should know my future sister-in-law. I should have done basic research. She turned back to me, frustration flashing in her eyes. I'm good at research. I'm a congresswoman. I research everything. But I took Derek's word for it. He's very convincing. He's also very wrong. Rebecca's voice sharpened, anger creeping in now, directed not at me, but at Derek. He told me you were sweet, but kind of flaky. That you'd bounced around jobs, never really settled into a career. That you worked at the museum in some entry-level position and seemed happy enough. I felt the familiar sting, but kept my expression neutral. Derek has a version of me that makes sense to him, I said. I stopped trying to correct it years ago. Why? Because it was exhausting. Every time I tried to talk about my work, my family changed the subject or minimized it. I paused. When I became deputy director at the Met, my mother said, "That's nice, dear, but when are you going to settle down and have children?" When I was appointed executive director here, Derek said, "Cool, so you're like a manager now?" Rebecca sank back into the chair. And when I received the National Medal of Arts, I didn't even tell them, I continued. They found out when my aunt saw it mentioned in the Washington Post. My mother called and asked why I hadn't invited them to the ceremony. I told her I had. She'd written it down as Sarah's work thing and forgotten about it. I shrugged lightly. It's fine. I've built a life that doesn't depend on their validation. I have colleagues who respect my work. Friends who understand what I do. A career I'm proud of. I paused. What I don't have is a family that sees me clearly. Rebecca looked at me steadily. That may not be my fault, but I'm marrying into that family. Which means I'm part of the problem if I don't acknowledge what's happening. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees. Sarah, I need to be honest. The way Derek talks about you isn't just dismissive, it's condescending. I didn't see it before because I didn't have context. But now. She trailed off. Now I can see he's been lying. Has he been lying, I asked quietly, or does he genuinely not know? It was the question I'd been avoiding. Was Derek deliberately diminishing me, or was he simply so uninterested in my life that he'd never bothered to learn the truth? I don't know, I admitted. Maybe both. Rebecca stood. I need to make a call. May I use a private space? Of course. Jennifer can set you up in the small conference room. She nodded and left. Through my open door, I heard her ask Tom to wait in the hallway. Then there was silence. I turned back to my computer, trying to focus on the 17 emails that had piled up during the tour. But my hands were shaking slightly as I reached for the keyboard. This confrontation, if that was even the right word, felt larger than Derek and me. It felt like years of invisible labor, of achieving and achieving and achieving, only to have it dismissed by the very people who were supposed to celebrate it. 20 minutes later, Rebecca returned. Her eyes were red, but her jaw was set. I called Derek, she said. I asked him what his sister does for a living. I waited. He said, "You work at a museum in some administrative role. Events coordination, maybe." He wasn't sure. She gave a short, bitter laugh. I asked if he knew you have a PhD from Yale. He said, "Yeah, I think she mentioned that once, some anthropology thing." I asked if he knew you were executive director. He said, "Director of what?" Like you ran a department. She paused, steadying herself. I asked him if he'd ever looked at your bio online. If he'd ever Googled you. If he'd ever asked a single substantive question about your work. I said nothing. He told me he didn't need to, she continued, because you'd always been open about working at a museum, and he supported your choice to have a quiet career. The words landed like a physical blow. A quiet career. I told him the wedding is postponed, Rebecca said evenly. I told him I can't marry someone who doesn't truly see his own sister, who doesn't respect the women in his life enough to learn who they actually are, who lies to himself about his family because it's easier than confronting his own prejudices. You don't have to do that, I said automatically. Yes, I do, she replied. Sarah, I'm a congresswoman. I fight for women's rights, for equal recognition, for breaking glass ceilings. I can't do that publicly while privately marrying a man who diminishes his brilliant sister because she doesn't fit his narrow definition of success. She smiled sadly. And I can't marry someone I don't respect. Not right now. He's more than this, I said. Maybe, she agreed. But this is who he's showing me he is. And that's enough to make me stop. She picked up her bag. I'm sorry for taking up so much of your time. The tour was incredible. This museum is lucky to have you. Thank you for coming, I said. At the door, she paused. Tomorrow night at the reception, I'm going to introduce you to Senator Williams, Representative Torres from the Arts and Culture Committee, and anyone else who should know exactly what you do, if that's okay with you. It is, I said. Good. She hesitated once more. I hope Derek figures this out. You deserve a brother who sees you. Then she left. The rest of the day passed in a blur of logistics and crisis management. A delegate from Japan had a medical emergency and needed to cancel. Could we arrange a virtual connection? The British Museum's director wanted to switch panel assignments. The caterer needed final headcount numbers. At 7 p.m., Jennifer knocked on my door. Dr. Mitchell, your brother is in the lobby. He's asking to see you. My stomach tightened. Tell him I'm in meetings. I did. He said he'll wait. I sighed. Fine. Send him up. Derek appeared 5 minutes later, looking rattled. His tie was loosened, his hair slightly disheveled, he'd clearly come straight from his law firm. Sarah, what the hell? He said, closing my office door behind him. Rebecca called me today and postponed the wedding. She said it was because of you. It's because of you, I corrected calmly. Because you don't know anything about my life. That's ridiculous. Of course I know your life. You work here. You do museum stuff. You're happy. Derek, I'm the executive director, I said. I run this museum. I manage a staff of over 1,000 people. I oversee a budget larger than most small colleges. I coordinate international cultural policy. I've testified before Congress. I received the National Medal of Arts from the President. He stared at me, stunned. The National Medal of Arts, 2 years ago. You were invited. You didn't come. I thought it was just some work thing, he said weakly. Some ceremony for museum employees. I didn't know it was. He trailed off, looking around my office as if seeing it for the first time. This is your office. You have a corner office. I have the executive director's office, I replied. Yes. But you never told me you were in charge. I told you I was appointed executive director 4 years ago. You said, cool. So you're like a manager now? I said I was the chief executive officer of the museum. You said, that's great, sis, and changed the subject to a case you were working on. Derek sank into a chair. I don't remember that. I know, I said. That's the problem. We sat in silence. Through my window, the Washington Monument glowed against the night sky. Tourists moved across the mall, tiny silhouettes in the dark. Rebecca said. I don't see you, Derek said finally. She said I've been condescending and dismissive. That I treat you like you're less than me. You do. I don't mean to. That doesn't make it hurt less. He rubbed his face. You're smarter than me. You always have been. You went to Yale. You got your PhD. You've accomplished all of this, and I think I needed you to be less successful than me so I could feel okay about my own career. The honesty caught me off guard. I'm not making excuses, he continued. I'm just trying to understand it. When we were kids, you were always the brilliant one. Mom and Dad talked about your potential all the time. And then you went into museum work, and I thought, he hesitated. I thought you'd chosen something quieter. Something that wouldn't threaten me. I chose something I loved. I know, he said softly. And you built something incredible. And instead of celebrating that, I diminished it, because it was easier than admitting my little sister surpassed me. He looked at me. Rebecca's right to postpone the wedding. I'm not ready to be married if I can't even see my own sister clearly. You could learn, I said. You could start asking questions. You could visit my work, meet my colleagues, understand what I actually do. Would you want that? I paused. Did I want Derek in my professional world? Did I want to risk being misunderstood or minimized again? But he was my brother, my only sibling, and for the first time, he seemed genuinely willing to try. Yes, I said. I'd want that. Okay. He stood. They told me about tomorrow night, the summit thing. What are you doing? So I told him. I explained the International Museum Directors Summit, the reception at the National Gallery, and the role of cultural diplomacy in an increasingly fractured world. I told him about the directors I'd be hosting, the panels I'd be moderating, and the joint statement we'd be releasing on museum collaboration in climate change research. He listened, really listened. Can I come? He asked. To the reception tomorrow? It's invitation only, I said. Government officials and cultural leaders. Rebecca could probably get me in as her guest, he said quietly, if she's still speaking to me. He hesitated. I want to see you in your element. I want to see what I've been missing. I considered it. I'll ask the protocol office. If they approve it, you can come. Thank you. He left, and I stayed in my office another hour, finishing emails and reviewing notes for the next evening's reception. At 9 p.m., my phone rang. Hi, Rebecca said. I hope it's okay that I'm calling. It is. Derek told me he came to see you. He said it was hard, but good. It was both. He asked if I'd take him to the reception tomorrow as my date, she said, a soft laugh in her voice, even though we're not engaged anymore. I think he's trying. He is, I agreed. Whether it lasts is another question. True. But I told him I would, on one condition. He has to read your entire bio online. Every publication, every project, every award. He has to actually know who you are before he walks into that room. Did he agree? He's reading right now, she said. He called me 20 minutes ago to ask if you really testified before Congress. I told him to keep reading. I smiled despite myself. Thank you, Rebecca, for pushing him. And for not hating me. She sighed softly. I walked into your museum thinking I was doing you a favor by acknowledging your workplace. I'm mortified. You didn't know, I said. Now you do. And now I do, she agreed. See you tomorrow night, Dr. Mitchell. The International Museum Directors Summit reception was held at the National Gallery of Art, in the West Building's soaring rotunda. 200 guests, museum directors, cultural ministers, members of Congress, ambassadors, and arts leaders, the very center of the international cultural world, gathered in one of America's most beautiful spaces. I arrived early, wearing a floor-length midnight blue gown I had purchased specifically for this evening. Tonight, My role was both professional and diplomatic, welcoming guests, making introductions, and ensuring the right people connected with one another. The French delegation arrived first. The Louvre's director, Martin Laurent, greeted me warmly. We had worked together on a joint exhibition 3 years earlier. "Sarah, the museum looks magnificent," he said, kissing both my cheeks. "This summit is already a triumph. Wait until you see the panel discussions. We have some fascinating provocations planned." He laughed. "I'm looking forward to it." Soon the other directors began to filter in: Britain, Russia, China, Japan, Germany, Spain, Brazil, South Africa. Each was a leader in their field, each entrusted with preserving and presenting humanity's cultural heritage. And I was hosting them, coordinating them, leading them. At 7 p.m., Rebecca arrived with Derek. She wore a red dress that struck the perfect balance between professional and elegant. Derek, in a tuxedo, looked visibly nervous. They approached during a brief lull in the greetings. "Dr. Mitchell," Rebecca said formally, then smiled. "You look incredible." "Thank you, Congresswoman. You both look wonderful." Derek stared at me as if he were seeing a stranger. "Sarah. I read everything. Your bio, your publications, the articles about the Met appointment, the National Medal ceremony. I spent 4 hours reading about your career, and I was an idiot. A complete idiot. All this time I thought I was the successful one in the family. I thought I was the one making important contributions. But you've been changing the world while I've been billing hours." "Derek," I said gently, "your work matters too." "Does it?" he asked. "I help corporations negotiate contracts. You preserve human history and advance cultural understanding between nations." He gestured around the rotunda. "These people are here because you organized this, because they respect you, because you're a leader in your field." Before I could respond, the secretary of the Smithsonian approached. "Dr. Mitchell, we're ready to begin. Could you take your place?" "Of course." I turned back to Derek and Rebecca. "Enjoy the evening. We'll talk later." I walked to the small stage at the front of the rotunda, where a microphone stood ready. 200 faces turned toward me, expectant. I took a breath and began. "Good evening, and welcome to the opening reception of the International Museum Directors Summit. I'm Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Executive Director of the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History, and it's my profound honor to welcome you to Washington, D.C. I spoke for 8 minutes about the importance of museums in a changing world, our responsibility to preserve the past while remaining relevant to the present, and the necessity of international collaboration on issues such as repatriation, digital access, and climate change. I introduced the keynote speaker, the Director General of UNESCO, and then stepped aside. For the next 2 hours, I worked the room. I introduced the Japanese delegation to potential American donors, connected the British Museum director with congressional representatives interested in cultural funding, and facilitated a conversation between Russian and Ukrainian museum directors who needed to coordinate a traveling exhibition despite their country's political tensions. This was what I did. This was who I was. At one point, I noticed Rebecca introducing Derek to Senator Williams. Derek looked overwhelmed, but engaged. He was asking questions, real ones, and actually listening to the answers. Near the end of the evening, Martin Laurent found me again. "Sarah, the European directors have been discussing something," he said. "We'd like to propose that next year's summit become a rotating event, and we'd like you to chair the organizing committee. Would you consider it?" Chair the organizing committee. It would mean coordinating with museums on 6 continents, managing a multi-year planning process, and becoming the de facto leader of international museum collaboration. "I'd be honored," I said. After the reception, Derek and Rebecca were waiting for me in the lobby. "That was incredible," Derek said. "Watching you work, seeing how everyone respects you, how you commanded that room, I've never seen you like that." "That's because you've never looked." "I know," he said quietly. "But I'm looking now." He paused. "Can we start over? Can I learn who you actually are?" I thought about years of being dismissed, minimized, ignored. About the hurt that had built up like sediment, layer upon layer. But I also thought about tonight, about Derek spending 4 hours reading about my life, about him showing up, trying to understand, willing to be uncomfortable. We can start over, I said. But it has to be real. You have to actually care, not just feel guilty. I care, he said. I promise I care. Rebecca watched the exchange with quiet satisfaction. I should let you two talk, she said, but Sarah, call me next week. I'd love to discuss some cultural funding legislation. I think your expertise could be invaluable. I'd like that, I said. She left, and Derek and I stood alone in the empty lobby of the National Gallery, with only the guards and the ghosts of centuries of art around us. Tell me about your work, Derek said. Really tell me. I want to understand. So I did. We sat on a bench beneath a Monet, and I told him about the challenges of modern museum leadership, the balance between education and entertainment, the ethical questions surrounding repatriation, the excitement of new discoveries in our research collections, the quiet satisfaction of watching a child's face light up in front of a dinosaur skeleton. He listened. He asked questions, good ones, thoughtful ones. At midnight, we finally left. He walked me to my car in the underground parking garage. I'm going to fix this, he said. Not just with you, with Rebecca too. I'm going to become someone worthy of both of you. Derek, you don't have to be perfect, I told him. You just have to be present. Then I'll be present, starting now. He hugged me. It was awkward, we hadn't hugged in years, but it was sincere. Over the next month, Derek showed up. He came to the museum 3 times, taking tours with different curators and learning how each department worked. He attended a public lecture I gave on cultural preservation. He read my book cover to cover and emailed me thoughtful questions about specific chapters. He also worked on himself. He started therapy, confronting why he had felt the need to diminish me. He had difficult conversations with our parents about family dynamics and favoritism. Rebecca agreed to restart their relationship slowly, dinner once a week, no more. She was clear that her career mattered as much as his, that partnership meant equal respect, and that she would not tolerate being treated as less than. And Derek listened. He changed. It wasn't perfect or linear, but it was real. 3 months after the summit, Derek called me on a Saturday afternoon. Sarah, I just got off the phone with Mom. I told her about your work, really told her. About the summit, the UNESCO role, everything. How did that go? She was shocked. She said she had no idea. I told her that was because no one in the family ever asked you about your life. We just assumed we knew. What did she say? She cried. Then she asked for your phone number. Derek, she already has my number. I know, he said, almost sheepish. But she wanted me to give it to her. Like getting it fresh would mean starting fresh. He paused. She wants to visit. She wants to see your museum. She wants to see your life. Something shifted in my chest, maybe hope, or maybe just exhaustion finally loosening its grip. Tell her to call me, I said. I will. And Sarah, thank you. For what? For giving me another chance. For not writing me off. For believing I could be better. You're my brother, I said simply. That's what family does. That's what family should do, he corrected. But hasn't always done. Not to you. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment, looking out at the Washington, D.C. skyline. The museums were out there, holding humanity's history, telling our stories, preserving what mattered. I had spent years building a career that spoke for itself. I had achieved everything I set out to achieve. But what I wanted most was simpler than all of that. I wanted to be seen. And finally, slowly, my family was starting to look. It wasn't the ending I had imagined. It wasn't dramatic or definitive. But it was real. And real was enough.